source goods, patterns, fabric, buttons, trims, things like that. And then we'll help with manufacturing. We also do branding, photo shoots, social media. We help with business strategy, costing, budgeting, things like that. So today's call or live event is going to be on 5 more tips for production management. So if you guys watched me last week, then you're familiar with what my first 5 tips were, but I'm going to go ahead and just run you through those again in case you guys missed it. You also can watch it. It's going to be on the Makers Row Facebook page, so you can watch the first 5 tips there. And it'll be recorded. Today's call will be recorded if you miss it as well. So again, I'm Anna Livermore from Bmora, and we have partnered up with Makers Row, who is launching a site called Embark Live, where they have a bunch of different professionals and experts in different areas, whether that's production management or I think they got some lawyers on there, digital marketing, things like that. So Embark Live, you can sign up for that at embarklive.com. All right, so in review of last week, we have 5 tips for production management. Number 1 is to be organized. Number 2 is to be asking for a completion date. Number 3 is to check in when your production is on the line. Number 4 is to write down quotes that you get from the factory, either in their writing or in your writing, and have them sign off. Number 5 is to have perfect samples and tech packs when you walk into production. So those were the 5 tips that I went over last week. Today, I'm going to talk about 5 more tips about production management. Number 6 is be prepared for something to go wrong. So unfortunately, a lot can go wrong. Oh, and Embark Live is chiming in. I'm doing a budgeting call today. So budgeting, if you're interested in how to budget for a collection, start to finish, how much should you spend on production versus your patterns and samples versus your branding, I'm going to go over all of that today in the budgeting class that I'm offering at 4 o'clock. You can go to, there's like a little gnat in here that's been driving me crazy all day. You can go to Embark Live, embark.live, to book your seat for that at 4 o'clock. And I'm going to give you my template for budgeting and take you through exactly what needs to happen in there. So number 6 is to prepare for something to go wrong. Unfortunately, even if you do all of the steps, everything is perfect, things still can't go, oh my gosh, or this gnat is like just circling my head. So people can try and kill it. Anyways, unfortunately, even at large companies, even after 10, 15 years in the business, even after working with the same people year after year after year, things can go wrong in production. And I always just want to focus in on what's the solution? How can we fix this? How can we move forward? Figure out later why it went wrong and avoid doing that again. But in the moment, it doesn't so much matter whose fault it is, why it's wrong, what happened, what the mistake was. You want to find a solution as quickly and as easily as possible. And I do that with my own staff all the time. They know if a problem arises, what's the solution? Immediately, solution. Then once we have the solution, we implement that and we take care of it as quickly as possible. We can later evaluate. And that's another one of my tips too, is to evaluate the process and what you could have done better later. But prepare that there probably will be some sort of hiccup when it comes to your production, whether your deadline is missed or one of your supplies runs out, or you run out of labels and need more labels. So knowing that these things kind of happen and just focusing on the solution. Always look at the solution. Have a good, close relationship with your factory so that they're willing to work this out with you and you guys can all work together as a team to find the solution. But things do go wrong in production on a larger scale, on a smaller scale, when you're new, when you're in business. There's always little things that come up and little hiccups. You know, if this was easy, everybody would do it. So I do see that there are some questions. I definitely will get to those questions at the end. So don't worry about that. If you have questions, type them in. I'll go through and answer those when I'm done here. But number 6, be prepared that something might go wrong. Don't let this devastate you. If you are going to be a designer and one thing goes wrong in production and then all of a sudden you're out, you're done, that's unfortunate. You want to be able to work through it. You want to prepare for it. That can be a preparation in your budget and in how you cost your garment. We do have a cushion in the costing for if something goes wrong and it has to be recut. So your costing shouldn't just be bare bones. One mistake shouldn't put you under. So you want to prepare for that before it happens. Someone's giving me a tip to get rid of gnats. That's useful. I'll do that for next time. Number 7, keep track of what's completed and what's in progress. So yes, it is, and I can't stress this enough, always your job, the designer's job, whoever's doing your production management, it's their job to be organized for the factory. Your factory, a lot of the factories we work with, they're not operating online. You know, English might not be their first language, so even connecting with them on the phone can be hard. So we do a lot in person with our factories here in the Garment District, and we do all the organizing on their behalf. If you're working with a company offshore, things obviously will go through email, but the more you can organize on your end, the better. You want to keep track of your inventory. You want to keep track of what's completed, what you gave them, what's expected, what's your PO. You want to track you want to inventory those garments before they leave, and we talk about that next. But keeping track of what has been completed and what's in progress. How many garments do you have in place? Even keeping track of your inventory. If you've given them 1,000 yards of fabric and you know they're only going to use 750, that's on you to know that when your fabric is done, or when your production is done, that there's going to be 250 extra yards of fabric for you to pick up. So staying organized, keeping track of everything on your end is super, super important. Number 8, an in-depth quality check should be done before the garments leave the factory. So what's most important in that is if your factory says your product's going to be done October 1st, you need to give a quality check time onto that October 1st. So that doesn't mean you're selling your garments at October 1st at 5 p.m. That doesn't mean you're doing a photo shoot October 2nd. That doesn't mean that everything's going to FedEx at October 1st at 5 p.m. That means quality check. That means you schedule in the time to do the quality check. You want to count all of your garments. You want to go through, first what you do is you go through and every 10th garment you want to check. It depends on how many garments you're making. If you're making thousands, every 10th garment. If you're only making 50, you want to check every 3rd and see if there's any issues. If there are issues, then you want to go back through the rest of the production to see if there's issues there. But you want to do a quality check, and if there's anything that needs to be addressed, you want to address that right away. So if something has to be sewn differently, or if some hem has to be completed, you want to talk to the factory. Again, this is why the perfect tech packs come into place, and you'll always want to do a top of production of every style in every colorway so that you have this one perfect garment that your production is supposed to match. If you skip that step, then it's more than likely it's more challenging for them to match something perfectly that's in your brain. So making sure there's a perfect tech pack and there's a top of production that's done. But doing an in-depth quality check, and then also giving your factory that time to fix those garments. So the quality check should not only allow for the time for you to count all the garments, inspect all the garments, but a few weeks there for them to fix any garments if needed. So that's a lot of designers run into problems because they've planned something on October 2nd. And then October 2nd happens, they don't have their inventory in time, and then they're upset at the factory because things weren't done. But things were done on October 1st, but on October 2nd, they started the quality check and fixed those quality issues. So you want to set yourself up for success, giving yourself a window for that to be completed after the completion date, if that makes sense. Number 9 is to be realistic and patient. So, it's kind of a catch-22, right? Like, you want everything done on time, you want things done perfectly, but there is a percentage of production that's a norm for there to be some quality issues. These are people sewing these garments with their own hands. So there's some room for human error. What that looks like is normally around 4-5%, where there might be something that needs to be fixed. So being patient with your factory and knowing the last thing your factory wants is for there to be something wrong in quality, because they don't get paid to fix it if you can prove that that's what you asked for in the first place. So they lose money. And B, they already have something on their timeline to start after your project is done. So they want to move on so that they can make money. So it's not in anyone's best interest that this happens. They don't want this to happen. So really looking at these people as your partners in your success instead of the people that you've hired and kind of are working for you. You guys are working together. So being patient, being realistic, and giving them enough time to successfully do your production. You don't want to be going into a production and say, okay, I need this in 3 weeks. And then they say it's going to take 6. And you'll be like, I need 3. Because what that's doing is that's rushing them. And you're setting yourself up to not give the workers the kind of time they need to give you a quality project or product. So that's number 9. And number 10 is after every production. During production, like I said, solution-oriented, moving forward, what do we need to do? Stay proactive. After every production, you want to sit down and self-reflect and evaluate your project. What did you learn? What do you not want to repeat? What could you do better? And then implement that on your next production. Because time is of the essence, it's not always valuable for you to stop and do that in the moment. I always prefer to stay solution-oriented and continue to move forward. So those are my tips for today. I'll review those really quickly. But again, like I said, this will be on the Makers Row Facebook, so you can always watch that. If you're interested in learning more about a budget, because that's the number one question that everyone always asks me, how much money do I need to launch a clothing line? And it's different for every designer depending on what are you making, how much is your fabric, how many styles are you doing. So it's different for every single designer. And because I have been getting that question pretty consistently every single time, I partnered with Makers Row and Embark to do this budgeting call today. I think to purchase a seat, it's still available. It's $105. You'll walk away with my budgeting template and also know how to use it so that you can make it specific to your company. We keep the classes really small, so you'll be able to ask me questions and I screen share so you understand the template. So that's today at 4 o'clock, 45 minutes, 4 o'clock Eastern. All right, so I'm going to review. Number 6, be prepared for something to go wrong. We don't want one thing to go wrong with your production and it to put you out of business completely. So be prepared, know what you're going to do, take the right steps. I mean, obviously we want things to go perfectly, but just in case they don't, you want to have a plan. Number 7, keep track of what has been completed and what's in progress. Remember, it's your job to stay organized, not the factories. We'd love for the factories to be organized, right? We'd love it. But they want to cut and they want to sew. And it's really on you to organize your production. Number 8 is to do an in-depth quality check and give yourself enough time to do that before you've got any deadlines. If that's a ship date, for example, if you were doing wholesale, which not a lot of people are, you want to give yourself at least 2 weeks from the ship date for that quality check. And number 9 is to be realistic and patient. Number 10 is after it's done, self-reflect evaluate your project, see what you could do better, and how you might have made mistakes to make sure that you don't do those again. All right, so I have some questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and go through that. What type of fabric? I assume that's what type of fabric do we source for clients? It can be anything. I've been doing this for 12 years, so I have a ton of vendors that I source from. Yeah, so all of these questions are in regards to fabrics, so you can reach out to me. You can hire me through the Embark site to do a consultation around fabrics. And what we work in all different types of fabrics and minimums. What if your vendors don't care? What if they don't want to fix the supply of the new product? Obviously, they would be a bad vendor, but the vendor options may be slim. Yeah, so this is huge. And that's why I keep stressing it's so important to have a good relationship with your vendors. My vendors will fix things for me, and that's because I've established a really great relationship with them. So working with people off of referrals, going in through, like, I can make an introduction for you, my clients, I introduce them to the factories. So it's tough, but it comes down to that relationship, being understanding. And if you can prove that that is what you had ordered through a tech pack and a top of production. So that means, for example, like if you're working with one zipper, they've made a sample out of that zipper already, you've approved it, and it's perfect. But if you give them different zippers than they made the samples in, fair game for a mistake. So you want to make sure that everything is perfect in that sample and in that tech pack before you do production. And if it's not, then you can bring them back to that and say, see in this sample, see in this tech pack, this isn't what I had asked for or what I ordered. Then it's easier for it to work in your favor. To get rid of gnats, few drops of dish soap into a small container with something like honey or sugar water. Great. Yeah, we just seem to have like one that's been circling my head this whole time. Okay. For the in-depth quality check of a production run, how is that different from the final pre-production sample with the factory? Would most issues be identified in pre-production? Yes. So that is why you do a pre-production sample. All the issues should be identified, and your production should match that pre-production sample perfectly. But you still have to do a quality check to make sure that that happened. So when I'm talking about quality check at the end of the production, you have that pre-production sample, and that's what you're matching your production back to check. Okay, so those are my questions on this platform. Now I'm going to go through the Maker's Row. When you say be prepared for things to go wrong, what type of things can you plan for? I assume you don't mean like a natural disaster. Yeah, you should have insurance though, in case a natural disaster does happen. If there's a hurricane or a fire at your factory, you should be insured so that that doesn't put you out of business. So as far as like preparing for that, there is ways that you can. But more so, prepare for things to go wrong would mean, if you run out of labels, if your fabric needs to be recut because it was cut improperly, if something, just when you're entering into production, you want to have an open mind to where if something does go wrong, it's not so detrimental to your psyche that you can't move forward. You say, okay, I know this is part of the game. Part of being an entrepreneur, and I've talked about this lots, is knowing what to do when problems come up. Knowing what to do, because things aren't going to be perfect. Things aren't going to go exactly as you planned. Things aren't going to be exactly the same as they are today. So mentally be prepared to, like, when that comes up, I'm going to find a solution. I'm going to move forward. And financially, it's not going to put me out of business, is more so what I meant by being prepared for, something to go wrong. Is the top of production garment the same as the final sample? So final sample sometimes is done by a sample maker. The top of production is done after all your production has been cut. So you no longer can make any changes to the pattern. It's only for sewing detail. Does that make sense? So sample is cut, just the sample's cut. Your top of production or pre-production sample is sewn from your production. So they've cut all 100 units or all 500 units, and then they make one before they make the rest of them. But all your garments are already cut. That's how you avoid the sample fee. Okay. Let's see, I'm just scrolling to see more questions. In case something goes wrong from the factory side, is it the responsibility to sew a new bunch of cut garments? So that's where you really have to work it out with the factory. Ideally, they're going to want to fix the garments that they have instead of recutting all from scratch. And you'll want them to do that too, because then that's not additional fabric cost. So hopefully nothing has gone so wrong that they need to start from scratch. But if you can tie them back to, I have this perfect top of production, I have this perfect tech pack, and it's something that they cut the garments in red instead of blue, and you had your purchase order, and you have everything in alignment on your end, then they should redo it on their dime. But if they didn't do a top of production in that colorway, if you didn't have a perfect tech pack, if you never gave them a PO, then that's where it's a gray zone. You'll have to work with them in the middle. So you just want to make sure that you're prepared for production on your end. Because if it's something that they straight up did not follow in regards to your samples or tech packs, then it is their responsibility to redo it. Yep, Embark Live is telling you about the class that I have today at 4 o'clock. All right, I'm just scrolling for more questions. Who does the sample for the photo shoot, the factory or the pattern maker? Pattern makers normally only make patterns. They don't make samples. That's your sample maker. And either your sample maker, you can use that sample for your photo shoot, or you can use your size check run. We didn't talk about size check run, but you can use your size check run for your photo shoot, or you can use your production for your size check run or for your photo shoot. More than likely, it's going to be that size check run that you're going to use for your photo shoot. And the size check run is usually done by the factory. All right. Okay, does anyone have any more questions? Let's see. Do most factories have insurance for things that go wrong at their site versus the business owners having business insurance only? So factories do have insurance. I don't know if that's going to cover your production because you're the one that's profiting off of that production. So you might be the one that has to have the insurance to get that claim. The factory's insurance might only cover claims if you were to sue them. I don't know. You'd have to talk to someone more specifically in business insurance, but I would recommend that you have business insurance as the business owner, because then you can file the claim with the insurance instead of having the factory to have to file a claim on your behalf and then you to claim that money from the factory, if that makes sense. Yes. Okay. All right, so you guys are so welcome. I hope to see some of you on the 4 o'clock today around budgeting, and you can reach me. I'm Anna Livermore from VMora. You can reach me at Makers Row, makersrow.com/VMora. I got one more question. Sourcing fabric, is it better to purchase from the mills rather than the distributor? Save money, better relationship. So the mills have very, very high minimums compared to vendors that will give you 5-yard minimums. So you won't be able to, you'll get a better price, but you'll have to buy their minimum, which can be in the thousands. Okay. Maybe one more question. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you guys so much. Again, Anna Livermore from VMora. You can reach me at makersrow.com/VMora. You can also hire me through the Embark Live app for a one-time consult. And you can also buy a seat for the budgeting course that I'm teaching today at 4 o'clock. And I will see you here next time. Thanks so much.